My name is Jack Halliday and I'm here from the PECAN Coordinating Group, together with colleagues Deb Sykes and Rhonda Small, and Tim Shue and Lachlan Hensley from the Metropolitan Community Power Hub, who will field questions tonight. I'd like to start by respectfully acknowledging the Yalukit-Willam clan of the Kulin Nation. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge and uphold their continuing relationship with this land. On behalf of PECAN, I'd like to welcome you all to our second webinar on the community battery, being run in conjunction with the Community Power Hub. We hope it represents another step forward in the development of Port Phillip community energy projects. Most of you will know that PECAN represents a network of environment and community groups in Port Phillip. One of our major priorities is to encourage projects focused on reducing the amount of community emissions generated in the municipality, now at around 1.8 million tonnes a year. If you're in this audience tonight because you're concerned about this situation and you think you have the capacity to help in the work PECAN's engaged in, please contact us through the PECAN website. There's always more work than we can deal with, especially at present. And like all community groups, we depend on finding new volunteers who are capable of assisting. After that plug, I'd like to hand over to Deb Sykes, who's done a power of work on the recently completed community survey, to outline the major findings and where they'll take us next. Thanks, Deb.
Thanks, Jack. That's great. So I also would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the Yalukit-Willam land on where I am this evening, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and acknowledging and uphold their continuing relationship to this land as the traditional owners. And as well as Jack, I'd also like to welcome you all on behalf of PECAN. We've got well over maybe about 30 people so far tonight, so that's really exciting. I would like to thank everybody who had a go at the questionnaire. It's been fabulous for us. There's been over 263 responses, so I thought I'd just share that with you. Okay, is everybody okay with that? Yep. All right, so the community battery, I'm just going to give you a quick overview, and then I'm going to hand over to Tim Shue from the Metropolitan Community Power Hub, and he will give you a quick overview of community batteries and then address the issues brought up in the questionnaire. But this questionnaire brought out a huge range of responses, which was exactly what we wanted. It's given us all an insight into both the opportunities and the challenges that lie ahead with this exciting project. This significant response from community provides us with lots of data to work with and gets us ready for things like if DELP, part of the state government, provides funding for a further neighbourhood battery initiative, then we're kind of on track to being closer to being ready for that. So that's exciting. I'd also just like to mention, because I just realised nobody has, that we are recording this session. And so if you don't want to be recognised on the recording, that's fine. Stay with us. Just turn your camera off. So let's go. I was thrilled to see over 90% of people who responded to the questionnaire feeling positive and supportive of having a community battery installed in Port Phillip. That's exciting. We actually had respondents from out of Port Phillip as well, but although their responses and questions have also been addressed, it's important to know that the data we need is the Port Phillip stuff. This slide asks what people would expect to gain from participating in the Community Battery Project. And I, as Jack said, you know, we've got this problem of greenhouse gases and warming and climate change. that was the biggest issue that people think that we can address through this kind of work, reduce greenhouse gases. But I also like to see that the issue of community and local energy and local participation is also really important. And it makes me think of the recent floods in Queensland and northern New South Wales. Devastating climate change impact that is happening all around us. Community in that instance was incredibly important and keeps that society going despite the odds. And I think that our community in Port Phillip also has that concept. So exciting stuff. Where would you consider an appropriate site for a community battery? By far, as you can see, the response is co-located with existing electric stations. For instance, I have one, there's a little park down the end of my road and there's a little electrical substation there. That for me would be a great place. And obviously a lot of people think that if you've already got the infrastructure, just kind of expand it a little bit. Also council land and public property. And just to say, we're working closely with council and to kind of go through this and begin to develop how we go about getting a community battery, first one out of many, into Port Phillip. I've put this slide up. It's a bit complicated. I couldn't actually edit it. It's complicated to look at, but I wanted to put this one up because it's exciting as far as I'm concerned. So there's four questions in it. One is about buying and selling energy to a community battery. And out of this, 85% of people who responded either interested or extremely interested in buying and selling energy. But 93% of respondents are interested or very interested in buying energy. So you've actually got a really good balance there. In addition, 82% of people are interested or very interested in investing in a community battery, and 61% of people are either interested or very interested in donating funds. So you've got people who are really putting their money where their mouth is and participating in every sense. So that's exciting. What a great community we've got. This question I've put up because it's important, whether people have solar panels, because this whole concept is going to depend on people who do have solar panels and make excess energy, and then those who don't have solar panels and want to access energy, renewable energy. So this is good to know that that's actually where we're aiming. It fits the model perfectly. How important is it that the community battery focuses on accessibility and affordability of renewable energy for everyone, including tenants? Now, for me, this is a very important concept as well, because we want equity. And we know in Port Phillip we have one of the highest rating of people who are living in apartments or multi-dwelling places that you can't put solar panels on. And there's a lot of renters in our area as well. So for reasons beyond people's control, they can't get solar panels on. But that sense of community is coming in. It's not just those who have solar. Nearly 90% of people want everybody to be able to do that. So that's all I'm going to say. I just want to say thank you again for people who've responded. There is a lot more data in the questionnaire. We're still analysing it. We will continue to put the results. It's your data. We'll be sharing it. We'll be sharing it with council. We'll be sharing it with the Metropolitan Community Power Hub, and together we can get there. So thank you, everyone. Over to Tim.
Thank you, Rhonda. Thank you, Jack, and everyone at PECAN. I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung, and I'm calling in from their country here in Richmond this evening. And I just want to start by saying what a phenomenal job everyone at PECAN has been doing to get where we are today. Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here, and I look forward to the conversation. So I'm the Chief Operating Officer at a small not-for-profit called the Yarra Energy Foundation, and we have been given the task to lead the Melbourne Metropolitan Community Power Hub, of which PECAN and the Eco Centre, Deb, Jack and Rhonda and others are all supporters of and part of. And tonight I'm just going to start off by giving you a very, very brief overview of batteries, and I will actually, because I've been told by Deb, I only have 5 minutes. I'm starting my timer, so I'm sticking to all the rules. So yeah, I've just covered off the Metro Community Power Hub. It's funded through Sustainability Victoria, and it involves a range of community climate groups and local councils across metropolitan Melbourne. Our battery, sorry, I should say that YEF, the Yarra Energy Foundation, is running our own community battery project, and we're actually on track to deploy on the 5th of June this year in Fitzroy North. These are some of the partners that are involved in that project. It's very, very exciting, and I'll basically be drawing on our experience from that project to try and give you a bit of a flavour of what a project in Port Phillip could look like as well. So for those of you who aren't super familiar with community batteries, in terms of what they are, basically you're looking at what we describe as a mid-scale or a neighbourhood scale energy storage system, or a BESS, battery energy storage system. They, at the moment, are not super, they're not proliferated across Australia yet. We're still very much in the pilot phase. At the moment, there's probably about a dozen or so projects going across the country, ours being one of them. The first community batteries popped up in WA probably about 5 or 6 years ago. And you can see that there are a range of different types. So when we talk about community batteries, it's important to say that when we talk about a community battery, we at YEF in the Melbourne Metropolitan Community Power Hub mean a battery which is medium scale storage suitable for a neighbourhood, but which delivers community benefits. So just take time to let that sink in. There are mid-scale batteries which can be used by networks and such that do not directly involve or necessarily directly benefit communities. So we would usually refer to them as mid-scale batteries. DELP, Sustainability Victoria and others, such as the researchers at Australian National University, refer to these as neighbourhood scale batteries. That's more of a neutral and a more of a broader umbrella. So as you can see from this photo here, they come in all shapes and sizes. This one up here on the left is up in Yackandandah here in Victoria. This big green one was installed last year by Ausgrid in New South Wales, Beacon Hill. And this is an example of what the Tesla community batteries look like in the Western Australian trials. And if you're interested, I'd recommend having a look online for the final reports on the Western Australia trials. Lachlan?
We're having trouble seeing your presentation, unfortunately.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. Can you see that now?
Yes.
Oh,
classic. Good. Sorry about that, everyone. I had it on my screen and I shared it earlier, and that's why I thought it was sharing. I'll backtrack really quickly. So top left is an example of the Yackandandah battery. Underneath that, we've got the Ausgrid battery in New South Wales. And then on the right here is an image of the community battery over in Western Australia. And we can provide more information on that. There's more information on our website too. I've got about a minute left. Let me just move to the next slide. So in terms of what community batteries can do, one of the first things that we talk about is how community batteries can help reduce solar waste. They can also help remove what we refer to as export limits. So if the network is particularly old and there's a lot of solar coming into that area, the network can't necessarily handle it super well. And that's why we look for areas of network constraints or areas of high solar clusters to add a battery. And basically what the battery does is it has a soaking effect. So during the day when excess solar power is being generated and exported to the grid, a community battery would be there to absorb that and then provide that hopefully during evening times. A community battery on a grid increases what's referred to as hosting capacity, or the network's capacity to handle solar and storage. So if, especially in areas which are potentially constrained, a community battery can actually allow the installation of more solar, which is obviously very important if we're to get to net zero as soon as possible. Community batteries also create a new kind of ecosystem of production and consumption. So we reduce losses in energy through transmission, because hopefully with a community battery, you're able to capture and use locally generated solar power, and then send that out back to the grid in the evening to the neighbourhood around the battery. Network support is another benefit, and one of the reasons why DNSPs, the distributors, the companies that manage the poles and wires, are very interested in batteries, particularly mid-scale batteries and community batteries. And one of the larger points, which has definitely been emphasised through the research from Australian National University, as well as other proponents for community batteries, including some politicians who are supporting these types of policies, see equity as a major component of the way community batteries can benefit everyone. And I'll probably try and touch more on that later. I know I'm just over time, but I'll just finish by saying community batteries are very likely to put downward pressure on electricity prices. And I'll be able to explain this in more detail, because I'm sure we'll get into it in the questions. And you're welcome to read the slides, which will be distributed afterwards as well. So in short, community batteries will also help us to reduce power prices in the long term. And I'll stop there. And pass back to Deb or Jack.
Oh, yeah, okay, so hi, it's me, Deb, again. So Tim, you have a number of questions that came through on the questionnaire. If you could perhaps start off with what you think are the most pertinent questions, and Rhonda will monitor the chat. And so if you have a further question or something else, can you pop it in the chat, and Rhonda will collate all of that and ask people just to say very briefly what their question is, so we can keep this moving and give as many people a go. We might not be able to answer everything. Some things might be taken on notice. Also, it might be too early in the whole project to answer some of the questions, but let's just acknowledge that and keep the communication going. So, Tim, what was the question that was most of interest to you that you might like to start going, and then Rhonda will keep monitoring that chat line.
Thanks, Deb. So it was interesting in the survey results that a lot of you who completed the survey suggested that you'd expect a community battery to be located potentially on public lands, maybe council property. So one of the first questions that we got when we started our project was, where's the battery going to go? So I might just start there and share my screen again. So, and just confirming that you can see my screen this time. It'll be a great story to tell everyone. I did a presentation last night but forgot to share the screen. So anyways.
Yep, we can see it.
One of the first steps that PECAN has been doing, and we've been supporting them with this too, is doing basically some high-level solar mapping across Port Phillip and looking at where the solar panels are located. I mentioned before that community battery has a soaking effect. So rather than calling them community batteries, we colloquially call them solar sponges. And I will show you some data on that and the kind of effect that a sponge like a battery would have. But basically, you've got all these little suns here represent solar installations. What you'd be looking for is a density of them, but particularly a density of them on the same part of the subnetwork. So the grid basically gets divided up into subparts. So even though this might geographically from a Google map look like a solar cluster, you definitely just have to check, and this is what we can assist with later down the track, is making sure that that cluster is all on the same part of the network, and therefore putting pressure on the network, which a community battery could add value to. It's unlikely, at least in Victoria, across city power today, that you'd find a constraint, but it has been an issue in the past, and a constraint being too much solar energy being exported and people not being allowed to export their solar. So just to clarify what that means, there there's going to need to be a constant upgrade of infrastructure, whether that be the poles and wires themselves or community batteries, if we're to get Victoria, at least the inner city, solar penetration up. So across the country, you probably are aware, solar penetration's ticked over the quarter, so 25%. In the city power network, it's still very low. Unfortunately, it's sitting probably about 5-6%. And city power are actually expecting that to go up to about 25% in the next four or 5 years. So we are sort of looking at an acceleration of solar. And if you're going to do that, we need batteries, we need storage to help us manage that. Appropriate land is sort of a whole discussion, and credit to PECAN and the City of Port Phillip, who've already sort of had early discussions about, how the City of Port Phillip could potentially be involved in supporting a project like this one. Through our project, we've had a very close working relationship with the City of Yarra, and we've been very grateful for that. And they've assisted us with planning issues, or hurdles rather, that need to sort of be worked out. The battery for ours will actually be located on private land owned by City Power themselves, and we've managed to co-locate the battery with existing electricity infrastructure. It's going on the outside of a zone substation. The most important, and what I can see from tonight as well, is actually community interest. So there's a number of reasons for that, but I'm very impressed to see the response that PECAN has got over the last couple of weeks with the survey and the turnout tonight. You don't underestimate the importance of your community support. This is critical for planning processes, for council support, for funding. If PECAN and others are going to look for funding for this project, which we hope to support them within the next few months, demonstrated community interest will be a major factor. So anything you can do to support or demonstrate your support and interest and ask questions and participate will go a long way. So definitely do not underestimate that. Obviously, councils with climate action plans and those councils which have declared climate emergency, there's obviously a strong alignment there that can be made with council objectives and what a community battery can provide in terms of value and services. And yeah, finance and technical resourcing is something that you also need if you want to go the full mile and get towards delivery. I'll just give you a not a sneak preview, I'll give you a preview of what our site looks like, just to give you a feel of what it could be in Port Phillip too. So ours is located just outside a zone substation, which is this building here, just on this grassy verge, and it's near a roundabout. So it is, it's very residential, but I suppose the location here is located on a sort of medium busy level kind of road and intersection. Yeah, you can see here with the circle, that's where we're going to be locating it. And another question that we get, which I might as well just address here, is what's it going to look like? So I'll give you a bit of a preview if I can find the slide. I'm sorry, where did I put you? Here it is. So this is just an artist concept of the community battery which we're about to install. And had a lot of conversations with people who were afraid that it was going to be the size of a shipping container. And through a very thorough procurement process, we were able to land on this system here, which is called a pixie power shaper, and it's Norwegian, and it's got a very compact footprint. It's very, very quiet compared to every other community battery assessed on the market. It was the quietest. And it's incredibly safe and modular as well, which gives us certain flexibility, which is important for an inner urban setting, which is probably going to be the similar case for wherever a battery is located in Port Phillip too. So I know there's a lot of other questions around. I might just skip to this one here, just to build on what a community battery would do in terms of function and how it can help reduce your emissions. So over here on the left is data representing the mix of your electricity grid in terms of sourced power. So here in yellow, you've got the amount of electricity in the grid coming from rooftop solar at 12:30 p.m. last October. You can see here there's unfortunately still a big chunk of brown, which is brown coal. And then in the evening on the same day, you've got dominated by brown coal, and solar rooftop generation just drops to a sliver at 6:30 in the evening. So what a battery would do is help us to shift what I've basically called the solar window. So we want to capture as much of that excess solar or as much of that solar or renewable energy which is in the grid, especially during the day when it's at its highest, and try and transfer that to generate during the evening. And what you've got is a double whammy here as well. So you've got a massive proportion of coal-fired power on top of peak demand. So you've got worse grid mix on top of higher demand in electricity use, which is obviously not what we're looking for. A battery can help to counteract both of those things by supplying this solar window, or hopefully higher, of renewable energy to peak demand in the evenings. What that does, not just reducing emissions, but hopefully reducing power prices as well, because if demand stays the same and you increase the supply, we hope to make energy more affordable. That's sort of it in very high level concepts. It's a lot more complex than that, and the emissions reduction potential is a lot more complex than that, but that just gives you a bit of a high level understanding of sort of what's possible. I might just stop there, Deb, just in case there's anything that's come through in the chat, and I might just look at my notes as well and see what the other high priority questions were from the survey.
Yeah, so while you do that, Tim, Rhonda, yes. I can't see the chat, so Rhonda, what's in the chat?
I can see the chat, and there's been some answers to some of the questions. For example, Keith wanted to know about what the size of a medium-sized battery would be, or what it would, and Lachlan's provided a bit of an answer to that, anywhere from 170 up to 250. I think the Yarra battery is actually going to be 250 kilowatt hours capacity.
Yeah, 284 kilowatt hours.
Okay, 284, getting better all the time.
110 kilowatts. Yeah, that's right. It was roughly 250, but we've got it to 284 kilowatt hours.
Okay, and then another question, which of course is important, is what is it going to cost?
Yep. Thanks, Rhonda. Yeah, I might touch on that now. So again, complex question, depends on the scope of your full work and what you're looking to do with it. So I'll be very clear. With our project, we received an $800,000 grant from the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning through the Neighbourhood Battery Initiative. So that's a Victorian Government funded project. They released that last year. It's the first tranche of funding that they've released as part of their announcement, and ours is one of 3 projects funded for delivery. In terms of cost of the battery, which is often what people are looking for, we managed to get, or one of our criteria actually was below $1,000 per kilowatt hour. So that was the standard at which we were looking at. And you can use that as a rule of thumb, but it does depend on your use case. It does depend on what you need. Obviously, different sites, different uses can vary those types of costs, but that gives you a very rough idea. So you'd probably be looking for a similar size battery. You'd probably be looking in the $250,000 to $300,000 mark for the battery installed. And yeah, that doesn't include, staff costs or any operating costs of your organization. That would be for the battery hardware itself, including the inverter and other bits and pieces that they need to connect. There's a few different elements involved in the installation, but that cost is included in that.
Mm-hmm. And a sort of follow-up question about how does one make money with a battery?
Excellent question. Yeah, let me find the correct slide here, and I'll show you. So here is a very approximate diagram of what a business model could be with a community battery. So the way they talk about it, they talk about value streams, and they talk about a battery tapping different value streams. The expectation for our battery, and this is still yet to be finalized in the modeling, and we'll see how this plays out once the battery goes live. We're expecting 66% of revenue from the battery, and I should say the battery itself will generate revenue. So the battery is something actively participating in the energy market. It's something which is actively being engaged all the time using really advanced software, and it'll be using machine learning and other types of things to basically optimize itself over time. So this is not a static thing, it's a very dynamic thing, and it's very advanced, unlike a household battery. So a household battery, sort of probably in the same way that many of you who drive cars probably don't use it all the time every day, but a community battery, one of the advantages of a community battery is your asset is engaged all the time. when prices are low, the community battery is importing, and that's usually when solar will be exported as well onto the grid. And then at night, usually when prices are higher, the community battery will be selling that energy back to the grid. So anyway, I'll come back to the value stream. So the main value stream is what's called FCAS, Frequency Control Ancillary Services. So don't get too worried about technical stuff, but basically FCAS is what's called network support, and a battery helps the network overall by absorbing energy when the network doesn't want it and distributing energy when the network wants it. And the battery gets rewarded for that activity and for that work in revenue, and that's called FCAS revenue. There's a few different markets of FCAS which the battery can participate in. I won't go into that detail, but yeah, Chris Wallen, who's our project manager, could potentially provide some more information on that if you need. And that's looking likely to be about 66% of total revenue. About 30% of revenue will be arbitrage, and that's trading electricity on the network. Like I said before, a battery has this ability to soak up excess energy when it's cheap and deliver it when it's needed most, and it can make money that way. There's also tariffs as well. So City Power, which is the distributor of the DNSP covering Fitzroy North, where our battery is located, has actually just published new tariffs. And this is actually groundbreaking because it's the first community battery tariff ever to be released, I think, in Australia. And our battery will actually be the first battery running with these tariffs. And basically, the battery can be rewarded from the network with these tariffs, and will gain a tiny fraction of income from that also. And yeah, anyway, there's information on the tariff publications, which we can circulate if you're interested. That they're publicly available from City Power. I believe as well the community battery for Port Phillip will be in the United Energy Network, so it's a different part of the network, but not too dissimilar. So I hope that answers the question about revenue and the business model of how a battery can help pay for itself.
And I think a follow-up question here, which was just about the battery being programmed to maximise revenue by controlling import and export times. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what you were saying too. Is that right? To meet optimal market.
Correct. Yeah. And it's a great question, because when we talk about optimizing, again, coming back to community involvement, it's so important that your principles and your benefit sharing and how you want your battery to work for you gets translated into how the battery operates. So as an example, if we wanted to make more money with our battery, we would just charge and discharge twice a day, and overnight we'd be able to make more money. But the battery itself, we want the battery to be soaking up renewable energy and deploying renewable energy. We don't want the battery to be soaking up black or brown energy overnight and then discharging that to neighbours. It's our principle, it's our philosophy, it's our commitment to net zero that has guided that decision, even though it might not make sense or make the best sense financially. So, with our project in our community, and we've involved the local community in Fitzroy North and the local council and the distributor and researchers from ANU, we need the battery to be commercially viable, or at least that's what we're heading towards. That's what we're seeking. But we're also backed by very strong principles about what the battery is supposed to do, who it's supposed to benefit, and what the outcomes of the battery's operations need to be. So again, this is really important for community involvement, I think. I might just look at my list to see if there's any other questions. Oh, there's questions about timeline in the survey. Would you like me to talk to that?
That's probably helpful, Tim, I think.
Great. I apologize. There's too many slides here. I just need to make sure that I'm on the right one. All right, I'll show you the whole slide so you can check it out while I'm talking. So this is a project journey which our project manager, Chris Wallen, put together. And he presented this at a storage conference last year, and it got a lot of attention. It was the first time anyone had actually put together what does it look like from inception through to delivery. And I'm very pleased to say that we're over here near the finish line. It's been a journey, but we're really excited to go live in June. This is not a strict guideline. every project will be a bit different. You'll notice some of these things, could run throughout the whole process. There may be some which you start earlier and some which you push later. But this is approximately the path and the journey we've gone on. So I think it's useful to share that. At the beginning, Chris and Yef established a strong relationship with our DNSP, City Power, and Yarra Council as well. I should acknowledge as well that City of Yarra are a core funder of the Yarra Energy Foundation, and we already had excellent working relationships with them, and it's been fantastic working with them as well as partners on the project. Without a relationship with your DNSP, it's going to be more challenging. You need connection agreements and technical guidance and potentially data as well to guide what sort of system you would need to procure and how that might affect your business model too. The business model and ownership model are two things which are ongoing, but which our team looked at from the very, very beginning, because that would sort of shape potential locations, how the benefits would be shared, and how, of course, we would communicate our intentions with the community as well. So I should highlight that these things are still in progress, but they're things that you might want to consider looking at early. The business model and the ownership model, probably more so the business model, actually affects the parameters of what we call a feasibility study. So step one, or one of the early steps to getting a community battery is to run a feasibility study. And we did that data with some consultants, and now we are able to do that ourselves in-house, which is fantastic. And that's what we're actually going to be doing, hopefully, with PECAN in the next couple of months. With your feasibility study, that should spit out, basically, is this community battery going to be roughly commercially viable or not, based on your assumed business model or assumed benefits, or how you'd want to distribute those benefits. Finance, obviously, it's important. I outlined before, our community battery is funded through a grant, and it's likely that the next couple of batteries that get rolled out are likely going to have to depend on grant funding. But it is very possible as well, it's very plausible in the near future that investors or potentially even local councils, might be interested in helping to procure these types of systems. So figuring out your finance from the beginning is obviously very important. Tariff structure, I mentioned that before. I'm not going to go into detail there. I should note as well, a community battery will not affect your feed-in tariffs. So we get that question a lot. If I'm a solar customer, how do I connect to the battery? Am I going to get more money or am I going to get less? It won't affect the feed-in tariffs. This is completely independent of that. Council planning, definitely engage your council early on the planning front, especially, I don't know about the Port Phillip area around where we've been looking, Deb and others, but there could be some heritage situations that you might need to look into early. Community engagement. So I've been the lead for the community engagement in Fitzroy North, and you can't start that early enough, but you do need to start your engagement with answers to give. So I think PECAN and the whole team have done a fantastic job in getting this survey out. And again, thank you to everyone who's participated in that survey. I encourage you to share that with your friends and your neighbours if you're able to, because that will set the tone for the rest of the project. Site selection, I'd say, actually is something which PECAN are considering, working out in the next month or so, and that will be derived from some solar mapping data as well as input from the community. Software, so this is a really key one. So the thing that controls the battery and tells it when to charge, when to discharge, when to respond to FCAS events, so the network support events to get revenue, etc., requires very intelligent software. Rather than purchasing off-the-shelf software, we've actually used some of the grant money to develop our own software with ANU. And the advantage here, and I'm really happy to share this, we're developing software which is going to be open source. So PECAN and every other future battery, which ideally is driven by communities, will not have to pay huge software fees from companies that sell you stuff with licenses and that sort of thing. It just makes operating and the commercial viability very difficult. So we've decided to forge this path and try and help others after us access software so that they can participate in the deployment of community batteries. It's important for scaling. Retail aggregator, I'm not going to get into just because it's probably not necessary for tonight. The battery system itself, I've already showed you. It's a really, I think, very well-designed system, and I can talk about some more specifics if you do have questions. Connection design, delivery and installation, That's when you bring in your engineers, you bring in your installers, you bring in the construction folks, and then going live is sort of the end of that journey. So that's roughly what we've been on. And look, technically, we've probably gone on this journey over 12 months, but we have had funding. We got the funding towards the beginning of this financial year, but we'd already started work on the project before that. So yeah, that's just to give you an idea of the timeline. Are there any other questions, Rhonda, from the chat that might be worth raising now?
Yes, I think there are. There's one that might need to be followed up later. I think, Keith, you're interested in doing some things down in Queenscliff, but perhaps you can have a chat to to Tim or Lachlan offline about developing scope of works and things like that. The relationship between rooftop solar panels and the battery, in terms of buying excess electricity and selling it back in the evenings, what's that relationship? I'm not quite sure, Tim, whether you've answered that already.
Sure. So just to clarify, that's with customers or people who have solar on their home or their building, and they are exporting it and getting a feed-in tariff and then purchasing it again. Is that the scope of that question, Rhonda?
Yeah. Does the battery buy excess electricity from the panels during the day and then sell it back in the evenings?
The short answer is yes. Yeah. That's the short answer. Yeah.
Are the owners of the solar panels being paid for their power, the power that the panels generate?
So just to reiterate, any exports from solar panels, you would typically receive a feed-in tariff for that export, and we do not touch. We're not related to the feed-in tariff. That's a completely separate system. It's set by regulators, but do note that the feed-in tariffs are declining. I can't remember what percentage, but they've recently gone down a certain percentage, and it's likely they'll continue to go down over the years. A large reason for that is solar penetration is increasing. It's a good problem to have. I know a lot of people look at that as a negative thing, but it's a really good sign that we're getting more renewable energy out in the grid and we're reducing our emissions from electricity. I would say for those of you who have solar, thinking about getting solar, the best way to pay back your system is through self-consumption, not through feed-in tariffs. So it's a traditional way. Yeah, thanks, Keith. 5.2 cents a kilowatt hour from 1st of July. Is to look at your consumption profile and probably match a system that sort of helps you offset your exact consumption rather than relying on exports to try and pay off your system. That's just a very general rule of thumb, but especially as FITs get lower.
Really important question. What's the lifetime of a battery and what happens when it's over?
Love it. Great question. So we considered the full life cycle of the battery in our environmental footprint and our impact here. So obviously we're not just looking at community batteries from their operating life, but also what happens afterwards. Community battery, I think we can insure it, or what's the word? We're looking at a 10-year time frame for the operation of our battery. Batteries have degradation life, and when you get into if you get into your procurement stages, the degradation rate is probably something you want to consider. We have what's called a depth of charge, which refers to how much you charge and discharge your battery. Just like a phone's, probably most of you will have a phone in your pocket, just like this one, and it has a battery where if you charge it to the max and then empty it, if you do that regularly, it's going to reduce the life, basically the life expectancy of your battery. So using the software, using a part of that which is called an optimizer, we're going to be telling the battery to charge and discharge in the most sort of sensible way, which will extend its life. And we're hoping to get 10 years of operational commercial life out of the battery. It could go longer. That would be awesome. In terms of what happens afterwards, I'm really pleased to say that with Pixie, up to 95% of the hardware can actually be recycled, which is absolutely incredible. I don't think there'd be many other batteries on the market that could offer that level of recyclability. And I believe as well, all the battery modules. So I should say in each box, maybe I'll flick back to the picture so you can see it. In the box, they have what are called battery modules, and they're kind of like racks that get slotted in. And each of those modules are developed by a different company, but they're actually generated using 100% renewable energy. So you've got a battery system which is looking at being processed and manufactured using renewables. You've got a battery which will operate for at least 10 years because of the optimizer and its incredibly high, or actually incredibly low degradation rate. And we're only cycling it once a day rather than two, which extends the life of the battery. And you've got a very high level of, I'm sorry, I don't know if recyclability is a real word, but I'm going to use it. Recyclability, like you can recycle up to potentially 95% of that, which is very impressive. And, you know, we hope that technology will only continue to improve from there.
So, Tim, what sort of infrastructure, Jack's asking, what infrastructure do members require in their own homes?
Excellent question. None, nothing more than what you've got. So I want to actually, that's a great question, Rhonda, and thank you, Jack. One of the questions that actually came through in the survey was about virtual power plants, or VPPs, which some of you might have heard about. And basically, community batteries are, so they're different to VPPs, but they can be involved in VPPs. Community batteries are particularly important if you follow a model like ours. If a community battery allows people who are renting, people who live in apartments, people who cannot get solar for whatever reason, whether that be affordability or infrastructure-wise, in their home, a community battery is something that you can all participate in. So a lot of the trials that have been run around the country, including those in WA, and I think as well the one run by Ausgrid in New South Wales, they are designed for solar customers. So only for people, restricted to people with solar. We didn't really accept that in terms of our philosophy of equity and participation, and it was not something that our local community wanted. So we looked at a different model. We've got a unique model, or at least a showcase model, which we've described as local supply to all, regardless of if you can afford solar or not, whether you own your own home or not. We want you, and you will be able to benefit from the battery that's connected to the same part of the network that you're connected to. So you don't need to pay for additional infrastructure. You don't need to pay a fee to be part of that, upgrade. It's really, we're trying to make it as easy as possible for people. And I might just add to that as well, there's probably some questions or some thoughts in the audience about retailers. So do I have to change my retailer to be involved? The answer is probably not. We were initially looking at models where we would potentially make some agreements with retailers to offer a special, community battery offer. Still not sure where we're going to land there, but at the moment, it looks as though you shouldn't need to change retailer. Once the community battery is on your network, we hope that the benefits will start flowing.
Mm-hmm. There's an important question here from Richard about rather than solar panels feeding their power to the grid, why don't they feed it to the battery like you would if you had a battery in your house, and then get the power back at night from the battery?
Yes, good question. So the community battery would likely, and this is probably something which can be changed in a particular use case. With ours, the battery would only be capturing excess solar. So I actually don't know technically how you'd probably have to have some sort of special arrangement where you, instead of consuming, so self-consuming, you would be directly exporting your residential solar power directly to the network, which would then be technically absorbed by the battery when it's charging, during its charging period. But yeah, that's probably beyond me, Rhonda, to be able to answer in terms of technically how that would work. But it seems very unlikely that would be a case. But I can understand the analogy there with a household battery.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just go back to, feel free to fire some more questions at me, but I might just cover off on some apartment stuff because I know that was a really strong theme. I
think that's important. We're running out of time a bit, so it would be good to cover that. As you said, that was a very strong feature of the feedback in the survey. People wanted this to be accessible to renters and apartment dwellers.
Awesome, love it. So like I said before, at least with our model, the way we want things to operate with our battery is that even if you're in an apartment, a unit, whatever, like you should be able to benefit from this project not just those who have solar. So if PECAN's battery, if it gets up and running and it's following a similar model to ours, those living in apartments connected to that same part of the network as the battery will benefit. So that's the community battery part. I know there were some questions as well about supporting people who live in apartments and in units for solar, because often it's prohibitive. There's complexities with body corporates and lack of roof space, that sort of stuff. We are, through the Metropolitan Community Power Hub and with feedback from our communities, we're actually generating a comprehensive guide, a solar guide for apartments, specifically in Victoria. So we've recognised that nothing on the market exists right now. So we've sort of said, well, I think we need to do something. So we're engaging some consultants to pursue this over the next sort of probably 5 months or so, with input from communities. And I would just invite you as well today, if any of you have had experience trying to get solar in your apartment or in your unit and had run into barriers or difficulties or faced challenges or been successful, please reach out. We'd love to hear from you, to hear your story. And, we could probably connect you with the consultants, and they would probably like to interview you to get some information about your experience to then put that into the guide to help other people. So we want this guide to be freely and widely available, and that's what we're aiming for, hopefully to publish by the end of this year, if not sooner, to help all of you who are living in apartments just like me right now and, finding it difficult potentially, especially if you're renting, to know what steps you can take to get solar. Because it's difficult, definitely not shying away from that reality. It's difficult and potentially complex. But I'll stop there because I know we're running out of time.
So perhaps just a final question from the chat, which is really about, if there's no infrastructure required, how do you actually become a member? What's the kind of model you've got in Yarra, Tim?
Yeah, good question. So in terms of participation, there is no sort of membership fee or no specific retailer at this stage that we require you to go with to sort of benefit from the battery. It's pretty much, if you're connected to the same part of the subnetwork as the battery, you will physically, your network, your house, your apartment, your unit will be connected to that part of the network with the battery. So it's sort of like you don't actually have to do anything at this stage. There may be other ways that people want to do it. There may be special retail offers as well that come out after 1st of July this year. So just to backtrack, City Power, the distributor, have published new tariffs which could be and are likely to be picked up by electricity retailers, which favour those living on a part of a network connected with a battery. And it's too complicated for me to explain. It's probably an engineer. I'll need to bring in an engineer for that, Chris, who understands all the different tariffs and things. But that's basically what we're looking at potentially in the future. There may be some retailers who can offer cheaper prices, leveraging the network tariffs that are designed to favour a community battery and designed to favour a neighbourhood with a community battery.
Okay, so just thanks for that, Tim. That was fantastic. Just looking at the time, I think we should start wrapping up. From just listening to all of this, I figure we are in a very amazing position in the city of Port Phillip because we're not inventing the wheel. It's going to be a snowball effect. As Metropolitan Community Power Hub and Yarra Energy Foundation get their batteries in, we can learn from that and keep on going, and then other people can learn from us. So it's an ongoing thing, and that's great for us. And thank you, Tim, for sharing, and we'll keep on going. So what are the next steps? Firstly, we're continuing our discussions with Council, who are supportive of this initiative. There's obviously lots of hurdles to get through, but they're talking with us and we're talking with them, and they're very aware of where we're pushing forward. So that's exciting. The feasibility study that the Metropolitan Community Power Hub is assisting us with should be completed by the end of this financial year. We will be updating people with the results from this. The good thing about a feasibility study is it makes us just that step closer to being so-called shovel ready, so that when funding does become available, or, you know, there's political decisions to try and get more community batteries out, we're up the front because we've already started the work. So that's great for us, and the only way we can do it is with all of you. So that's fantastic. We've got nearly 200 email addresses from people on the questionnaire who registered that they would be interested in receiving updates on this project. So we've got that, and we'll be regularly updating people, and also putting updates on the PECAN website. So you can use whichever way you want, and we'll, again, that snowball thing, we can keep on going. At some stage soon, once we've done some of the mapping and understand what the geography looks like and all the little bits of the jigsaw puzzle that Tim described, we'll be looking to people like you to form a local community reference group and a steering group. And the purpose of that is to participate in the design of the community battery so it works for us in this area. Once we also have some geographical areas in mind, we'll be doing a letterbox drop in those areas to involve even more people in the community of those particular areas who might or might not know about what's happening, and we'll bring further ideas to that. So really at this stage, I think I'd just like to say thank you all for making the time. You know, we all are so sick of Zoom meetings, but it allows us to reach out to so many people, and you're giving your time to this, and it's exciting. As I said, we will be updating you. You can, by all means, keep on adding your email addresses if you would like updates, but keep on looking at the PECAN website. And onwards and upwards, I think where all systems go to an exciting new era in our community to address some of the big challenges ahead of us. So I'd just like to thank Metropolitan Community Power Hub and Yarra Energy Foundation, specifically Tim, for making the time with us tonight and out of his work hours, but it's great. I'd like to thank PECAN for, we're all on this journey together, and primarily I'd like to thank everybody here tonight. So and everybody who answered the questionnaire. As I said earlier, we've got the data now that actually gives us substance to keep working forward. So I think with no further ado, stay tuned. We'll keep updating everybody.